We are closing our 2022 MOYATalks Sustainability and Innovation series with Summer Minchew. Welcome, Summer. Summer is the managing partner of Eco Impact Consulting. She's an expert in green building certification, and she has managed a certification of more than 1.7 million square feet of green building space. And she's also a usual collaborator with Moya. Summer, we start with our guests telling us a little bit about their career arc.
Sure, well, I'll try to be brief. I grew up in Kansas City in and around the building industry. My dad is an architect, so we had a drafting table in our finished basement, and I've been drawing designs for buildings since I was a little kid. I went to Kansas State University, attended the College of Architecture, Planning and Design, graduated with a degree in interior architecture and product design. I was recruited right out of school to work for a firm in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is what brought me here in the first place. In my early days as a designer, I worked on sports projects, corporate and municipal workplace projects, and then I was relocated in 2008 to DC, where I worked for an architectural firm called Envision Design, which has since merged with Perkins and Will. And at that firm, my work there was heavily focused on sustainable commercial interiors, largely for the outfits in the associations and nonprofit organization realm. The firm partners at the time had a sister firm that focused on sustainability as a portal for achieving a greater competitive advantage in business, so enter Eco Impact Consulting. Some of the work there was really focused on the certification side and the building product side, for which the firm jointly culled staff. So working then on Eco Impact projects as a consultant, I developed a love for LEED and green building rating systems, sort of separate from the design process. And then from there, I transitioned fully from architecture and sustainable design to strictly sustainability services in 2012, when I was made partner at Eco Impact Consulting. And as an accidental entrepreneur, I've been doing this ever since.
Accidental entrepreneur. And how was the transition? What elements are completely relatable and which ones do you have to learn from scratch?
Absolutely. So, having a background in architecture helps me in many ways, right? Because I know the language of the project, I know the process, I understand your deadlines, I understand specifically for my architecture clients that you guys are being pulled in many different directions, and often sustainability is something that maybe at the forefront of the mindset, but sometimes it's not at the forefront of like implementation when it comes to all of the other factors that you guys are dealing with. So I really try to be that person and try to, make sure that my teams have an advocate, both from your perspective for delivering in sustainability, but also from your goals in terms of incorporating sustainability really beautifully within your project design.
Summer, so let's talk about green buildings and sustainability. What is the difference, if any, between green buildings and sustainable buildings?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Historically, in terms of like the term green building and sustainable building, they've really been used interchangeably. But I would say that this might be changing. The industry is really expanding the definition of sustainability in the built environment. So, we are or really need to be looking not only at environmental impact factors like whole building life cycle, energy and water use reduction. These are kind of our typical sustainable mindset frames, but we also need to be looking at, in order to be truly sustainable, how does the building impact health, equity, resilience, community? So I think the metrics for what is truly a sustainable building are and really should be evolving. As the education and as the awareness evolve, we too need to evolve our practices.
So where do you think that evolution is going towards?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of interesting things that are on the horizon. It's a really cool time to be in sustainability because things are changing. As I said, our awareness is changing. And so awareness drives innovation, right? So, we only have 30 minutes to talk, but I'll try to keep it brief. I get really excited about, what's on the horizon and what's exciting in the industry. I think the most critical, but probably like the least flashy thing is going to be, industry-wide green building adoption. We're starting to see from a federal level, we're already seeing this at a local level. Every building should be a green building, and like no more excuses, right? So the way that we accomplish that is through regulatory frameworks. And of course, cities like DC are absolutely leading the way when it comes to transforming the built environment because of these really robust regulatory requirements. And sometimes they can be challenging for us, and they can sometimes push us, but it's good. Like we need to bring everybody up. And then some of the flashier things I think we can all be excited about are, of course, advancing net zero energy, net zero water, net zero waste. Talking about carbon negative building is something that the industry is really elevating from an architectural perspective. I would like to see that taking hold, really specifically within like civil and structural communities as well, because we're looking at alternatives to structural, steel. We're looking at concrete materials, like CO2 sequestration is really, taking hold in, from a site perspective. Increased use of tools that are already out there, like Cove and Tally, that will support architects and designers and engineers in making more informed sustainable design and materials decisions. And then, of course, we know we're kind of all at the edge of our seats, if not sort of scrambling to project, like, what's going to happen with buildings in general, right? Because of COVID and the impact on how we want to work, where we want to work, how we want to meet with people. It's just really a cool time to be in buildings, because I think a lot will change and we'll have to shift our mindset in and around like what buildings, workplaces, places of community convening begin to look like. And I think that in and around that reentry conversation, there's of course health and wellness. We are hearing a lot about WELL and FitWell and other kind of wellness rating systems, and there is absolutely a place for those at the table, and we need to really think about that. But I would also argue, like, let's not forgo sustainability for wellness. There's room at the table for both, right? Because we need a healthy planet on which to build healthy buildings. So it's been really interesting for our firm too, to kind of stay at the forefront of these and continue to educate ourselves about where the market's going.
We'll circle back to the market and the certifications, but I think this ties very well together with another thing I wanted to ask you, which is you belong to SEED, the Social, Economic, Environmental Design Network. And I think that what you're saying right now, it also ties with climate justice, because not everybody has access to these sustainable, healthy buildings. Could you please tell our audience a little bit more about SEED?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So SEED is really about engaging in the public interest design process, which is really focused on kind of greater community buy-in for building projects. And the goals can include advocating for people who have a limited voice in public life, building structures for inclusion and engagement of all stakeholders, which allows kind of them to make community-wide decisions, whether that's from a single office space perspective or a public park perspective, right? Generating ideas to kind of grow from place and build local capacity and consensus. And then, of course, in there is designing to conserve resources and minimize waste. So SEED is sort of like LEED, but it's less prescriptive. It's really more of a framework for implementing the public interest design process. And I think that the industry has kind of much room for improvement on this. And so in our role as consultants and facilitators, generally we want to help our teams revisit the way that we approach our design process and who our constituents are in the work that we do, right? So often we really see ourselves and our owner. And it's a conversation between those, and it really we need to kind of open the umbrella a little bit and really think about who are our end users, who are our operational staff, who are, you know, the people who may just come to visit, who are the people who live in the community that might be impacted by the structure in general. So there's a broad, it's really a broader way to look at the design process. And then in terms of, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, continue, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then in terms of, you know, climate justice, you know, because it ties together, you know, there's a lot that designers can do, you know, within the public interest design realm, but really from a single building perspective that we can do. So, you know, the first step in that process is really understanding and recognizing how climate change has disproportionately impacted communities of color, especially within our cities. And so, you know, architects, you know, can do a lot, right? So we can look at improvement of air quality, both indoor and outdoor. So in that, we need to address, you know, this sort of inequitable health burden of air pollution and look at, you know, not only energy conservation measures, like including the percentage of energy, you know, reduction, which we typically do, you know, how much energy are we saving? But we also really need to kind of expand on those metrics and estimate the air pollution and the carbon generation in those system designs and look at, you know, which is going to be the most long-term, least polluting system, right? And we can also avoid combustion in heating, cooling, and air conditioning systems. So the term electrification is really hot right now. Everybody's talking about being all electric. And that's really important from a carbon perspective. And then, you know, just being really mindful of interior finishes and materials that have the potential to really impact occupants' indoor air quality, both positively and negatively, you know, during the life of our project. So on my projects, I look really closely at the VOC content and VOC emissions, you know, especially for those projects that are serving vulnerable populations, right? Students, children, elderly, anyone in a healthcare setting. It's really critical because these are the materials that we're around all the time, and we spend so much time indoors. It's really important to be very mindful of, like, you know, what the indoor air quality is based on the materials that we select. And then the other things that we can do, of course, would be to reduce the impact of extreme heat, right? Because we're getting warmer. So, you know, design strategies that help address these issues are, you know, some of those design school things, like, you know, looking at solar orientation, you know, shading of facades, looking at, you know, maximizing vegetation, of course, tree canopy, green roofs, utilizing native and adaptive trees and plants will also, you know, create a sense of place, which is really important, but also reduce outdoor irrigation requirements. And then, you know, using roof and non-roof highly reflective materials, so light colored concrete, for any hardscape areas, obviously like white roofs, you know, that's all. It not only makes the building itself more energy efficient, but it really reduces the heat island around the building, and then thus reducing the heat that our communities are experiencing based on, you know, our buildings. And then, of course, you know, not to get too political about it, but like voting is really important. So supporting from an environmental perspective policymakers who are concerned, like not only with conservation and physical processes around sustainability concepts, but also recognize the harmful human impact on ecosystems, climate, and most important, society, right? Because we're working to address these issues on a systemic basis.
And it ties with what you mentioned at the beginning, that initially these certifications or these third-party certifications were more a way of getting a competitive advantage. And now it seems to be more like they stem from a conversation that it's more honest in a way.
Correct. And I think, you know, well, I always like to say, I mean, specific to LEED, you know, it's a leadership standard. You know, if it was for everyone, it would be Eid. Although I wish it was for everyone. You know, it needs to be for everyone. But you know, there's a lot of leadership in this space, and just like our mindsets need to evolve, there's a lot of evolution in terms of, you know, what are our sustainability goals and what do they look like, and how can they be expanded?
So let's talk about how to make them for everyone, right? So would you walk us through your typical process of certification and how difficult it is?
Sure. So typically we like to begin in schematic design, and we kick off the process. We define the sustainability goals. We define any other goals, right, that the project team might have. Throughout the design phase, we're going to review the drawings. We engage with the design team to make sure that the established goals are translated into the drawings and in a way that meets the performance and prescriptive requirements of each rating system. So as you guys know, anyone who knows me knows that it's really important to follow the rules. You got to know the rules and you got to follow the rules. And it's my job to effectively communicate what the requirements are and how we can translate it into the confines of your project and your design. And then at that time, we often submit design or pre-build credits for review. So we'll often receive initial or partial credit award at that time. And then during construction, we engage typically more with the general contractor and the commissioning team to track materials and confirm completion of installation and testing requirements. And then on project completion, we submit construction or post-build credits to the reviewing body. And then just like we did during design review, we work with the reviewing body to answer any questions that they might have, and eventually certification is awarded. Sounds easy, right?
Fella knows that is. What processes would you think could be streamlined to help firms, to help consulting firms like yours, help other architects and other designers achieve it?
Sure. I mean, so early on, we like to conduct an integrated process meeting. It's one of the credits within LEED, but it's kind of more than that. And it helps us to examine cross-cutting sustainability concepts and sustainability goals, including our certification, level of certification. And we like to engage the entire team on this process, including the owner, operational staff, community, end user representatives. And this really rounds out the perspective of the building from the design, construction, and operations phase, kind of looking at the whole building's life cycle. And so there is where we can generate buy-in for some of our sustainability concepts. We can also incorporate at this time, you know, depending on the project goals, health promotion goals, social equity goals within this overall process. So everybody's on the same page, which really helps to kind of make sure that the rest of the process goes smoothly. We understand what's required, but we also understand what's desired. What are the most important things for this project? And then in terms of sort of streamlining the certification process itself, I mean, your best bet is obviously to work with a team that has experience in the rating system that you're pursuing. There is a real learning curve associated with, you know, all of the rating systems that we have worked with at Eco Impact. So having an experienced team or working with a consultant to help you through the process often saves time and makes the process more efficient, dare say enjoyable. I don't know. I mean, I always come at a project with the mindset of like, how can I make this easy and replicable for my team? Because I want every member to walk away, not just with a plaque to put on the wall, but I want everyone to have a positive experience and a positive impression of both their contribution and then a feeling of like, yeah, we should do this again. We should do this on all of our projects, right? Because I said, like, I want every project to be a green building. Ultimately, you know, it shouldn't be a different process or a different set of standards. Like, ultimately, green building should be the process and the standard. It's something that we do on every project, whether we're pursuing certification or not. And so if that becomes ingrained into the hearts and minds of every member of every team that I work on, then I feel like I will have done a little piece of what I need to do in this world.
Thank you. Summer, I have a couple more questions, but I'm going to open the floor now so the audience can ask you questions. And if there are enough, I won't ask you more questions. People?
I have a question. Hi, how are you? It's a very good presentation. So this is alternative energy and sustainability. It's been a topic of that we that that we dealt with in school and in work. My question, I have two questions. First question is, what do you say to the argument about alternative energy, like using you know, instead of fuel, using electricity, and they would say electricity also generates a type of fuel and it's also not sustainable. So there's a lot of argument around that. And my second question is, how do you change the mindset? How do you make it cool? Like for architecture design. You see, like Tesla created a cool car, so it's cool to own a Tesla. It's not just about sometimes about being sustainable to own a Tesla. It's they made it a cool reputation to own a Tesla. So how can we do something like that in design and architecture as well for the buildings?
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
it's interesting when I first started, I graduated from college a long time ago, right? And at that time, LEED was fairly new and green building was fairly crunchy. There was a lot of straw bale construction. There was a lot of, really super hyper vernacular, buildings going on. And there's still some really cool buildings in and around that space. So don't get me wrong. But I think the thing about green building is that it is a Tesla. Like there's no reason that green building cannot be as beautiful architecturally, as striking from an interiors perspective as every other building. In fact, it's better, right? Because it's going to provide a healthy space for occupants. It's going to reduce the energy, consumption. But in terms of the argument around renewables, specific to combustion, it's yes, electricity also, does require, but it's less kind of carbon intensive, which is really critical. And that's kind of where we're looking at, what is the pollution factor. And then, we do a lot of solar here in Charlotte. And, it really greatly reduces the energy cost. Upfront, the payback is typically, anywhere from 15 to 20 years, which is, pretty reasonable for most of our clients here. And it's also a leadership thing. So, a lot of people want to say that they're buying in, right? It's like owning a Tesla is cool because you're at the forefront of that technology. And so I think that, we certainly have clients that are not interested in doing on-site solar, in which case we would then, talk about, okay, how can we be part of, a community solar farm, or how can we somehow engage with the purchase of RECs that are, supporting wind and electricity, because we need this kind of groundswell. We need enough people supporting it in order for this to become a more regular means for power generation.
Any more questions?
Yes, I wanted to ask something.
Go
Hi,
ahead.
Summer. I've been working with you in Old Randall project. I'm
Hey, how are
Daniela.
you?
Good, and
Great to
you?
see your face.
You too. So, what I wanted to ask is that when you start a project, I know there's a lot of levels of lead, like a lot of achievements you can have. I don't know how to call it. Is that something you propose at first, like you check all the project and you say like, oh, maybe we can go for this type of lead? Or is that something the client asks you at the beginning and you start like looking for it? How does it work?
Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways. Usually a client has a goal. They have either a corporate standard or a regulatory standard that they're trying to achieve. So for example, for Randall, we know we needed gold, right? So we start with that mindset. Sometimes we have a standard or a request for, certified. And then we kind of get down the road and we're closer to silver. And then, so then we want to push for that, or we're getting close to gold. So then we want to push for that. So, you know, it's an accrual of points. So we try to keep all opportunities open and on the table that are available to a project when we start. We usually start with a lot in the maybe column, and then as the design progresses, we can kind of move those to yes, we can move them to no, and it helps us to get kind of a better sense of where we're going to end up. You know, most of our projects, I would say, kind of, if you think about it, it's like a bell curve, you know, so most of our projects are kind of in that silver and gold range, you know, with fewer just certified and fewer platinum.
Thank you.
Likia, go ahead, please.
I know really thank Summer for the old Randall team being so helpful, so patient, so passionate about it. Is without down the hill exponentially. So I really want to thank you for that. And to not lose faith, we're gonna make it, Summer, I promise.
Oh, that makes me happy. Thank you for sharing that. You know, some projects have more challenges than others, but I will say of that project, it fills all of my buckets in a way that not every project does, you know, because there's this really fantastic community piece. There's just an awesome equity piece. There's great health promotion going on. It's an existing building, so think about all the carbon we're saving from not building a new building. It makes me so excited. So I'm really excited to be part of that project team. And you know, it was a green project from the start. So we're gonna get, you know, recognized for the work.
Totally agree with you. Yes.
Rodrigo, I had a quick question too.
Go ahead, please.
Hey, Summer, how are you? This is Vinay. So, you know, obviously you work in the Carolinas, but you're also working a lot in the DC area, right? Do you notice a difference in mentality between different jurisdictions and different clients in different areas in terms of, you know, like how open they are to, you know, green issues, right? Especially as it relates to, say, like Charlotte and Washington, D.C., for example.
Yeah, I mean, comparing the two, you know, because DC has such a strong regulatory requirement, I do sometimes see, okay, well, we have to do this. And there's a little bit of, you know, it's a little bit of panic inducement because you have to achieve a certain level, right?
Right.
Charlotte does not have, outside of City of Charlotte buildings, they have their own regulatory requirements, and we do a lot of work with them. But outside of that, it's voluntary here. They have some ordinances which kind of make green building perhaps a little more attractive, but it's not required. So the clients that we work with here are more, in a way, on board with kind of the idea of certifying.
Mm-hmm.
Than some, I would only say some of our clients in DC. You know, if you're only doing it because you have to, you're less likely to be excited about the process. So of the clients that I have in Charlotte, I guess I would say that they're kind of more on board in general with being leaders and doing it because they want to. When you have kind of that regulatory component, you're kind of doing it because you have to.
Mm-hmm.
But I will also say that DC as a market is, you know, well above the rest of the country in terms of like number of lead projects, certified square feet, and you've got, you know, within the RFPs coming from DGS. I mean, it's just it's exploding what they're asking for from teams. Now we're looking at net zero energy. We're
Right.
seeing well. So it's really cool, I would say, from that perspective, that they're really gonna they're pushing that marketplace forward.
So just to kind of tag onto that, you know, as a design professional, right, you never really learn in school how to give a client bad news, right? And sometimes, you know, as when you're doing lead, you know, every now and then you do have to give a client like, you have to do this and it's going to cost you money, right? So how have you sort of gained that, experience, because we have to do that too sometimes as architects, give client bad news, right? So how do you approach that and how do you make that work so you don't end up being the bad guy?
Well, the really nice thing about being a consultant is that, typically that relationship is
You let the
between
architect deal with
architect and
it.
That's why I love my job, you guys. It's great. But in terms of like sharing bad news with my clients or trying to kind of perhaps mitigate any of those issues, whenever we're looking at a checklist, we are always going over. I mentioned I had worked on the USGBC's headquarters, their own building. GBCI denied themselves points that we thought we were going to get. So it's really important to note that, it's a third party rating system, whether it's LEED or, any of them, they're all third party reviewed. So we have to go over the bare minimum that we need. We have to shoot higher so that if we do end up losing a few points along the way, we're not scrambling or, ultimately disappointing someone with a certification level that they were not expecting.
Thank you.
Summer, do you have a couple more minutes?
I do.
All right. I wanted to circle back to tie this conversation to Tesla's analogy that Noor said, right? Because it kind of relates to this. Tesla was one brand, and slowly other companies are starting to adopt electric cars because now their motors and their engines are getting older. And now they can see the advantage of adopting the electric motor, right? Or engine. And that, how do you see this happening in design? Because sometimes the regulations go too fast and it's not easy for developers or cities to change. Like, okay, that's going to change the whole buildings of the city and turn them into LEED. It's not really feasible.
Yeah, I guess I would say, I've been in the industry for almost 20 years. And the wheels of change have been fairly slow. And we all, have seen the reports regarding, climate change impacts. And I think we all need to do more, whether we're required to or not. I think we all need to opt in. We need to, for my kids, please, let's do everything we can, and let's make sure that in every project, whether it's pursuing certification or not, that we continue to push ourselves, because we need to. The industry needs to evolve, and we really need to address the sort of elephant in the room, which is, 40% of CO2 emissions come from building operations and design and construction. That's a lot. It's more than, for the transportation industry. So we need to do better, and we need to do better very quickly. And, I think that there is a lot from a regulatory perspective, but I think that there's also a lot from a inspiration perspective, which is what as architects and designers, we do best, right? So digging deep and really getting inspired around one type of technology or multiple, and really pushing that in each and every one of your projects would be my best advice.
Thank you very much, Summer. This has been fantastic. We really appreciate you taking the time and your patience to talk with us.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
great
Thank you, Summer.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Summer.
Thank you.
See you all next week.